Maybe our next guest can tell us.
Other things
maybe
happen. Well, you're going to throw Michael Kaskey-Blomain on the spot. He's here to talk about all the ins and outs of what happened with the Sixers and the moves that were made or maybe not made, and you're going to hit him with odds right away?
Not right away. Maybe he knows.
What's up, MKB? What's going on, man?
What's up, fellas? How's it going?
We're just trying to make sense of what happened on Sunday, and I think a lot of positives by all means. And you look at the loss of Jimmy Butler, the arrival of Josh Richardson, and that wasn't even the craziest part of it. You know, Tobias Harris with that big money contract. Then all of a sudden Al Horford pops in to the scene as well. You're in tune with this team. You're down there. You're covering the squad. I know that you've got people on the team and the front office as well that you talk to. Was there anything at all that completely shocked you? Like, holy, you know what? I didn't see this one coming.
I would say the most surprising thing, which has kind of become a little bit more clear in the past 18 hours, is just that really the Sixers were not interested in, banking their future on Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
It's a guy that, they invested a lot in to bring in to the team and kind of hoping that he would be that third pillar along with Ben and Joel. And, Jimmy said and did all the right things here. There wasn't, any overt friction. There wasn't any, issues that we saw in the locker room or anything like that. But it's just become clear that from both sides, it was just, a partnership that just didn't work. I don't think Jimmy was really, fully comfortable with his role on the team and where he, fit in there. And I don't think the Sixers necessarily felt comfortable giving Jimmy the amount of money that he was looking for moving forward in a deal that would, in the short term, it would probably look all right. But in the long term, I don't think they were willing to, commit that sort of money to him. And that kind of, kind of came as a surprise to me after, how much they gave to get him back.
Well, how much of that decision hinged on maybe holding back the development of Ben Simmons? In other words, where Simmons couldn't develop into the player that they need him to be if he has to share the ball on the court with Jimmy Butler and maybe, have Butler be the guy with the ball in his hands in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that definitely played a part into it, and I think it played a part into their desire to get something done with Tobias Harris pretty quickly. I think they viewed him as a better long-term fit with the team. Obviously, in terms of age, he's 5 years younger than Jimmy. Mm-hmm. But, in terms of floor fit, kind of like you were just referring to, he's less of a ball-dominant player. He's more of a catch-and-shoot guy or a guy that can kind of, get in where he fits in, if you will, rather than needing the ball, necessarily to be effective, which is something that Jimmy's done throughout his career. So I think that, having, Ben wanting him to be able to develop, obviously Joel's the guy that's going to need the touches moving forward. I think they just felt, age-wise and on-floor fit-wise, Tobias was just a better fit with their two young stars, and they obviously made him, the top priority.
So when you look at this, and I noticed you mentioned that it was the Sixers who wanted to move on from Butler, more so than Butler wanting to move on from the Sixers. I know we got conflicting stuff out there. It seemed like the team wanted to get out that, hey, we offered him the 5-year deal. Woj, who was speaking obviously through Butler's agent, saying they didn't even offer us a 4-year max. Do you honestly believe, and it sounds like, and it's what I kind of took from it as well, MKB, that this was more on the Sixers, not that it's a bad thing, but it was more on the Sixers saying no than Jimmy Butler saying no?
Yeah, ultimately that's what it came down to. But at the same time, it's not. I don't think it's like Jimmy was dying to stay in Philadelphia. I think it was, solely a financial matter. Yep. If that money, was presented to him, 5 years, an opportunity he wouldn't get elsewhere, a contract that's take him, well into his 30s, that he's still going to be getting paid when, his skills could be, going down at that point in his career. I think that's all it was about to him. And when that wasn't there, I really don't think that Philadelphia was, near really the top of his choices. And I think obviously the Sixers knew that. I think they probably would have, preferred that, maybe it wasn't his top choice, but you would like to see some desire to run it back with the teammates and after the season that they just had. And I just think that wasn't there. They saw a guy that would probably stay for the money, and that's about it. And they, the money wasn't there. So it worked. I think both sides contributed to the departure.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us on the Lighthouse Insurance guest line. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. All right, Mike, tell us what we're getting in Josh Richardson, who, of course, came back from Miami to the Sixers.
Yeah, this is a pickup that I think, a lot of Sixers fans are going to be excited about. Obviously I think some remember him from last season, the first round in the playoffs, but you're basically getting, obviously not Jimmy Butler, but a guy that you could almost call Jimmy Butler light in terms of what he brings to the floor. This is a two-way player. Josh Richardson's a great defender. He can defend, twos, threes, maybe some ones, even, very versatile on the defensive end. And he's a solid shooter offensively. He averaged 16 points a game last year, shot, over 6 threes a game, made nearly half of them. So, it's a guy that projects to fit, really well in, Brett Brown's system in terms of two-way players that can get out in transition, pace and space, and, spread the floor around Ben and Joel. And it's a guy that's also on, one of the best team-friendly contracts in the NBA. He's under Sixers control through the 21-22 season, and is only going to be getting about, just over $10 million a year, which, for a player of his caliber at this point in the NBA is a really solid deal. It's not going to hamstring the Sixers moving forward. So they actually, for losing Jimmy, I think they got a player in return that's really going to, kind of fill the void that he left and help them, even in some other areas too.
So when you look at the overall big picture of it, clearly it was to move on, not get anybody bigger back or anybody on top of Richardson back to go after Al Horford. The money seems to be the concern, I guess, as far as, what you owe Horford after, a year and a half, in the same breath of, well, we didn't want to commit to Jimmy Butler. I'm not saying, hey, you should have committed to Jimmy Butler in hindsight because you committed to Al Horford, but you're talking about a guy in 33 that's going to be around for the next 4 years making a lot of money. Not to say he won't help the team right now. I get it's a short-term play, but what's the conversation like about what happens in 2 years?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest concern. That was at least for me, with Al, that was my biggest concern. This is a guy that's been in the league for, 12 years already, 33 years old. Like you said, he's going to be 37 by the time this monster contract wears up. But in terms of, comparing him to Jimmy, kind of like you just said, I think when you look at Al, it's a guy who's, I think whose game will age a little bit better than Jimmy's, obviously, who's, very dependent on athleticism. Horford is, as we've seen, he's not already the most athletic guy. He gets it done with, his physicality, his instincts, his intellect, passing abilities, his ability to finish around the rim and just be a solid body. And I think that's in the league today, that's a skill set that shouldn't diminish as quickly as, like a guard skill set. And also, I think it's a guy that they're looking at that they could have, Embiid obviously is the centerpiece of this team and the crown jewel. And Horford in the short term is probably going to play, a larger role. But as he gets older in the next couple of years, it's a guy that they could, potentially move to a bench role if they need to. He could play shorter minutes. He could fill in for Joel. So I think they look at him as kind of just a guy that they could use in a whole lot of situations over the next couple of years. It's a 4-year deal. You think for at least the next 2 years, he's going to be a productive player. Maybe that third year is a question mark. And then the fourth year is an expiring contract, which, around the league is an attractive asset. So I think it's a gamble in terms of the money and the years, but, the window for them is open now. They clearly think that, Al's a guy that can really help them on both ends of the ball in the short term. And, Elton wanted to go all in.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can use a lot of those terms to describe Butler, who's younger, but and that's why I go back to this being something about fit and something about feel.
It has to do with Ben Simmons.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Does.
Because does that make sense, MKB? And we're chatting with Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real MKB on Twitter. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Well, absolutely. I think that, like we were saying about Jimmy, he didn't have any overt issues with Ben or with Joel. But the style of play just didn't necessarily mesh. It worked out in the playoffs a little bit when push came to shove, and Jimmy kind of took the driver's seat there. Moving forward, the Sixers are about to invest a ton of money in Ben. They obviously already have a ton of money invested in Joel. I mean, those are their guys, and they want that development of both of those players to flourish. And I think, like you pointed out, guys, that Jimmy being here, there wasn't an issue necessarily, but it took the ball out of Ben's hands at times, and it probably stunted his growth, where Al is a guy that can come in and project to fit in, really nicely along next to both of these guys.
All right, I just have to ask one more question about Butler, and I'll move on, I promise. Well, technically not, because the Whiteside deal to Portland actually impacts the Sixers and the Butler deal. But let me just ask one more here. Why did they trade for Jimmy Butler?
From Minnesota.
It was at that time, I think it was something that they really did hope would work. On paper, his skill set, what he brings to a team is, something that would complement Joel and Ben pretty well. Obviously, he's a little bit ball dominant, but I think they saw him as the perimeter player too. You have the center, you have the ball handler and transition guy in Ben. You need that wing player to kind of complete the triangle there, and they saw that in Jimmy. Obviously.
But did that really change when he got here?
It was a gamble based in terms of fit. They didn't know when the trade happened how exactly he would handle Philly, how he would like it. I don't think that it did go poorly, but I don't think it went as well enough for them to feel like they could make that move. So, it was a gamble that, ultimately, I guess, didn't pay off, but I think it was something that Elton would do again if he had to.
All right, real quick, the Whiteside deal now means that Miami needs less back in the right, or they need to give up less in this deal. Specifically, they need to send out less money to make the deal happen with the Heat and the Sixers. So what does that mean now? Is it just Olynyk gets sent up here? Is Hero? Is there anybody you can bring in that makes sense with the Whiteside deal now in play?
I don't know how much it's going to affect it in terms of who the Sixers are on the receiving end of. Obviously, Richardson is the top target for them, and I don't think they're interested in bringing in additional, a lot of salary cap space on top of that. So I think more than anything, the Heat are still working to trade, Goran Dragic also somewhere, get him out before the season starts. So I think there's still some moving pieces on the Heat's end before this thing gets finished. But I don't think it's going to impact who's coming back to Philly. I think it's going to be just Josh Richardson, and they're going to try to fill out the rest around him.
Awesome stuff, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Mike. There he is, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, joining us on the Lighthouse Insurance guest line.